David Warner was a wall with a crack in it. You watch him, and there's a towering door that's been shut on purpose, but there's that leak of light and air at the bottom that he just can't stop. You could feel how he built his philosophy of acting, and you could definitely see where portraying Hamlet and Henry VI were crucial to his early years. Both characters are adamant about their beliefs, but are undermined by their own adamancy.
The lady doth protest too much, methinks.
Warner had striking looks like Depardieu on his best day, and an intensity that makes you wonder how his brain didn't just pop his eyes right out of his skull. He had a voice rivaling George Sanders or Alan Rickman.
I must congratulate you on that device. I confess that at dinner the other century, I thought you'd lost your wits.
While preparing my video on the Lovecraftian influences in Something Wicked This Way Comes, I watched John Carpenter's horror film, In the Mouth of Madness, which is an interesting but odd film. When David Warner came on screen, I felt a distinct relief, knowing at least I would enjoy the scenes when he was there. Now that's a special talent. Warner had a very long career on film and in the theater. He played Henry VI, not the most forgiving role, on stage repeatedly for the Royal Shakespeare Company, and he was the youngest Hamlet they ever cast. Not a bad start for a guy with stage fright who said he only started acting as a way to get out of a messy childhood and his failures as a student. In the cult classic Time After Time, he played a suave Jack the Ripper. He was Superman's father, Batman's foe Ra's al Ghul, Satan himself in Time Bandits, 3 characters on Star Trek, the bad guy in Tom Jones, and the vampire hunter Van Helsing. He's the haunted photographer in The Omen. He worked for Sam Peckinpah 3 times. Trying to list all he managed on screen would be futile. So I'm going to grab a couple of Warner's most mainstream films, polar opposite performances that showcase why I love this guy. In Tron, Warner plays 3 roles. His Ed Dillinger is the main bad guy, a heartless CEO who crushes his enemies and his friends. Barely moving from his chair, Dillinger controls everyone around him through sheer contempt. But his contempt is fueled by his own terror of the master control program which he himself has created, and somehow it's doing a hostile takeover of Dillinger's own company, played with even more menacing contempt by David Warner.
Keep those programmers out of the system and get me that Chinese language file I asked for. End of line.
Most of this movie is a sci-fi fantasy where programmers are represented by avatars that look like themselves inside the computer world. Dillinger's avatar is a sadist named Sark, who thrusts prisoners into gladiator games, denies his own gods, and never hesitates to step into the battlefield himself. But, just like Dillinger, Sark is terrified of his own boss, the Master Control Program. This is a cheesy adventure film, but Warner takes it all as seriously as Shakespeare. He infuses Dillinger, Sark, and the Master Control Program, each with his own flavor of arrogance and closeted fear. Dillinger is a powerful success who knows everything he has built is based on theft and lies. His employees hate him, and his success creating the Master Control Program is likely to soon destroy him. Sark is a cocky warrior who wants a challenge.
I've been hoping you'd send me somebody with a little bit of guts.
But is fearfully stunned when challengers actually arise who he can't handle.
What's the matter, Sark? You look nervous.
Well,
And the Master Control Program is cold-bloodedly single-minded like Hal in 2001. But unlike Hal, the Master Control Program is ambitious to move on to bigger things.
It's my fault I programmed you to want too much.
I was planning to hit the Pentagon next week.
Like Hal, the Master Control Program is completely assured that he's doing the right thing and bewildered that his slaves would rise up against his will. All 3 performances are masterful. On the far end of the spectrum, Warner played the best Bob Cratchit of all time in a 1984 television version of A Christmas Carol starring George C. Scott as Ebenezer Scrooge. Scott was a difficult but extraordinarily powerful actor, taking over every movie he was in. Facing Scott on screen would pose a real challenge for anyone. We see great actors like Nigel Davenport as Scrooge's father and Joanne Whalley from Willow as his beloved sister. But as great as they both are, neither of them have to act against George C. Scott, who stands in the background watching his youth play out. But going head-to-head with the tempestuous, overwhelming Scott are Carolyn Languish as Scrooge's niece by marriage, the underappreciated Edward Woodward as the Ghost of Christmas Present, and David Warner. Warner has the most screen time with Scott, and he has the challenge of portraying one of the most cloyingly nice men in literary history.
Yes, sir. And a Merry Christmas to you, Mr. Scrooge.
Humbug!
His Bob Cratchit never cowers. He swallows a lot of pride putting up with Scrooge's capriciousness, and when he comes home to his family, you understand why. In the presence of his wife and kids, Warner melts like butter. Cratchit's family is everything to him, and you can see why he'd do anything to keep them going. Warner makes Bob Cratchit, who is so often played as a sap, into a stoic hero. It's also nice to see Warner and York together as a happy couple years after they were adversaries in Tom Jones. David Warner works because, however he felt as a man, he projects steadfastness underlined by insecurity. In Tron, Bernard Hughes can insult Dillinger to his face because he sees that crack underneath Dillinger's arrogance.
Sometimes I wish I were back in that garage.
That can be arranged, Walter.
That was uncalled for.
In the weird romantic fairy tale The Company of Wolves, Warner's father to Little Red Riding Hood is clearly worried that he's hunting the wrong wolf. His Blifil in Tom Jones knows he's the bad guy, and his Bob Cratchit knows that he must be humiliated in order to be the good guy. Every David Warner performance has two levels, the one we see his characters acting out, and the one we judge him for. Warner knew them both.
Mr. Cratchit!
Here, sir.